Hi guys, so I'm going to start making a series of videos that explain in a bit more detail my approach to managing and fixing back pain issues long term, and also kind of highlighting what I think is important in terms to having a successful approach, obviously versus being unsuccessful and kind of getting stuck in that trap and endless cycle of back pain. So first thing to say, obviously a lot of my approach comes from a guy called Dr. Stuart McGill. In my opinion, I think his approach and his research and his exercises and tools that he uses, in my money, definitely the most effective that I've come across. I think a large part for him in terms of his success is to do with his kind of approach, in that he shares no allegiance to any one approach or method or way of thinking. He simply looks at the evidence, and more importantly as well, I think, is that his approach is not that back pain issues are all the same. As he says, there's no such thing as non-specific back pain, and what he means by that is that a mistake of a lot of clinicians and therapists when they kind of work with back pain is they have the impression that all back pain is kind of the same, like it's this kind of vague issue that's kind of been heaped upon you by the gods of fate. In reality, like he says, is that if you look at the damage that's been caused, for example, to the discs, the type of damage you've got will give you a very clear indicator as to how that person's damaged their back over years, because it does take years. And also, once you know that, you also know the best way and the best tools going forward. So obviously, in terms of my own back, I certainly wouldn't be still training and doing the things that I like doing without his approach and his methods. And obviously a lot of the guys that I work with, in my honest opinion, wouldn't have got on top of their back pain if it wasn't for his work. So give credit where credit's due. I definitely think about his contributions to lower back pain. I think a lot of people have just been kind of stuck, myself included, in the endless cycle of frustrating endless cycle of not being able to get out of pain with the back, and obviously having life and choices all limited because of that. I mentioned before, big thing on McGill's approach is that there is no such thing as non-specific back pain. So what we mean by that is that each back injury that I see, what we try and do is I try and understand the history of each person. So what you do for a living, what sports or exercise that you do. Did you used to play sport when you were younger? Do you train in a gym? What sort of exercises have you done? All of those things, and then obviously looking at things like x-rays and scans as well. That then kind of clears the mists, if you like, so that it's not really a mystery as to why that person's got a back pain or back issue. We can see, looking at the type of damage you've got and taking into account your history, we can understand what's contributed to that problem. And then once we know that, we can start to identify what we call your pain triggers, or the movements and habits that are sensitising the back to pain. So if you want my honest opinion, this is where if you're unsuccessful with dealing with your back, it's because you failed to do this or follow this stage or take it seriously enough. So when your back's in trouble, you're doing something, or there's a number of things that you're doing that are sensitising the back to pain. That's caused the injury in the first place, but also not giving it a chance to settle, so that you can start work on it to build it back stronger. So I like to think of it as a bit like a bank balance or a capacity for your back doing work. When you're in that the initial stages of injury, it's severe. You've got a very limited capacity, and everything that you do movement-wise is going to tax the back, to varying degrees until you're at zero. And then obviously, if you go back into kind of like a balance, if you go to overdrawn, that's when the problem's going to get worse. What we need to do is identify your pain triggers and the movements that sensitise your back to pain, take them out, and then you'll find that the back's capacity to tolerate work will start to increase and grow. Once we've got that happening, we've then got a little bit of leeway that we can invest in doing the right exercises to get you out of trouble long term. So with the best will in the world, even the most safest and effective exercises, they do require a little bit of movement capacity or work tolerance from your back. So the guys that I've had that have failed to sort out their back, and if I'm honest, it's probably 1 out of every 10, it's because they don't understand this stage. They just don't get it. They don't understand the importance of it. So you've got to take away this pain, whatever it could be. So what are common ones? So common ones for a lot of people, obviously, because most people have got sit-down jobs, is sitting down for long periods without adequate lumbar support. I think from probably 90% of the guys that I see is what causes lumbar disc issues, because instead of having a nice kind of natural arch, that lower back, which is where the lumbar wants to sit, you'd have either flattened or slightly compressed and flexed the wrong way for long periods, and obviously that's going to wear the discs out and obviously cause bulges and cause problems for you. So for a lot of people, being able to sit down, obviously you can't not sit when you're at work, so having some sort of lumbar support to help maintain and support that lower arch, that's probably going to be one of the biggest and most important things you need to do. What are other pain triggers if that isn't a pain trigger for you? So other pain triggers could be the way you stand, the way you bend when you're doing things at work, like guys who have more physical type jobs. It could be that you have faulty bending mechanics. Normally it's because your hips are very tight, so you don't use your hips, and so that work gets transferred up to your lumbar. The lumbar isn't designed to do an infinite amount of bending work, so it's going to start to cause problems. And basically you just wear things out a lot quicker than you should do. So obviously if that's one of your triggers, you've got to take that away, let the back settle so that we can start to do work on it. Other pain triggers could be like the sports that you play. So for example, things like tennis and squash, for example, a lot of that heavy rotational kind of movement. If you've got very stiff hips and a very stiff upper back, all that kind of twisting and kind of grinding sort of work is going to make its way down to your lumbar, and that's going to cause you a problem, 100%. Another good example is golf. Not only have you got that kind of twisting going on, but you're always kind of twisting to one way as you kind of wind up and follow through, so it kind of ends up making the muscles on one side way strong, and it all kind of tends to pull you off kilter, which again causes a problem for your lumbar back. But I can't stress this enough, is that it's not a mystery as to why you've got your back pain. There's movement habits that you've had that's created the damage and is creating the pain, so you have to get rid of them, let the back settle, and then you can start to work on the problem long term. But that's the most important thing. And the guys that don't get on top of their back pain, it's because they don't take that initial stage seriously enough, and they continue to do the things that aggravate the back, and it never gets your chance to settle. So if you want to have success with your back pain, identify the bad movements that aggravate, sensitize your back to pain, take them out, let the back settle. I can't stress that enough. Extremely important. The next stage, once we've identified your pain triggers and the movements that are aggravating your back, we've taken them out, the back's started to settle, our work capacity is starting to grow, we can start to invest some of that work capacity in doing exercises that are going to help you. So the general rule is basically, what are the right exercises for you to do? It depends. Everyone's a little bit different. Everyone's back injury is different. Everyone's movement habits are different. Everyone's got a different level of conditioning and ability to do exercises. Generally though, as a base foundation, what I like doing for my guys is what McGill calls his big three, and I want all of my guys to be competent at them before I let them progress into other things. So what are the big three? So they're the McGill curl up, the side bridge, and the bird dog. Does that mean that's where you should start? 100%. It depends. Maybe, I'm sorry to say for most people yes, but for you maybe not. It may be too much depending on what your conditioning and the type of injury you've got. Are they the only three exercises you should ever do? No. There's loads of other things we need to start doing, but I think as an initial foundation, if you can get competent in those three movements, that will stand you in good stead, and in my opinion give you the best chance of kind of building success on top of that and getting back into the things a lot quicker. Obviously there's other exercises that we can do, but my general approach, I mean, a lot of guys, obviously there's a bit of a problem with back problems in that part of the story is usually there's a instability issue somewhere. So those big 3 exercises will help fix that instability and kind of almost like build armour into your core around your injury to protect it. The other part of the problem is a lot of guys have got very stiff upper back and very stiff hips as well. So it's kind of a catch-22 because you're trying to build stability but also trying to increase mobility in other areas. The other mistake I see a lot of people do is obviously if they go and see a masseuse or a dry needle expert, you go and see them and they say, what's the problem? I've got back pain. I say, you're very stiff in your back, and they try and release that back or release your hips or upper back. You've got to be careful what you release, especially in initial stages, because there's a reason why those muscles are tight. And part of it is because the body's trying to create stability in other areas because the core muscles aren't working properly. It's trying to create stability in other areas, and if you take away those little last blocks of stability, things can actually collapse and get worse. So you have to be very careful. So my general approach is I like to try and build some sort of stability first of all, getting all the core muscles to work together and start building some strength and robustness around that midsection before I start taking away tight areas for that purpose. And I tend to find it's generally more effective. But again, it's different for each person and it depends as to what's caused your problem and what sort of state you're in when you do start working on it. So if you decide not to go the path of taking out your pain aggravators, building strength and robustness into your back, what's going to be your ultimate option? Well, obviously, you need to talk to your own medical practitioner. You'll start off with your GP, and obviously they'll give you a referral to a specialist. So there are other options that they'll give you to try and pain manage. So things like cortisone injections, things like that. Obviously strong anti-inflammatories. So all the stuff that isn't, will remove the pain for a period of time, but will not fix the underlying problem. Because the underlying problem is you've still got bad movement habits that are chewing up, aggravating and chewing up your back, and you haven't got the stability there, let the back kind of pull itself straight. So ultimately, what can happen, again, if you don't take, removing your bad habits and putting the work in seriously enough, obviously you're not going to get anywhere. So the choice you're going to live yourself eventually is that you'll probably end up with some sort of surgery. So, obviously there's lots of different types of surgery. So probably the most common, because a lot of guys, when they do have lumbar disc issues, we have an associated problem called what we call stenosis. So stenosis is a medical term, very simply in this case, basically means that you've got something, either a growth or a bulge, that's putting pressure, in the case of lumbar, onto the spinal nerve in the lumbar region, which ends up with things like sciatic type pain, where you have like one leg or maybe both legs either has numbness or tingling, or you get sharp pains sent down your leg. They're usually common signs of sciatica, which comes from stenosis. So normally when you get to that stage, you've got kind of two options or a mixture of both in terms of surgery. So number one is what they call spinal fusion, which involves putting screws and bits of steel in your back and fusing it all together to create stability. And then number two is what they call decompression surgery, which is more where they'll go in and actually wherever you've got the growth or the bulge, they'll trim it away as best they can to relieve that pressure and get rid of that kind of nervy pain that you've got going on. What I would say is be aware that this year a study came out, I believe it went over 5 or 6 years, where they compared patients in 3 different groups. One had the fusion surgery, one had the decompression surgery, and the third group had a mixture of the two. What they looked at was over the 6 years, basically who had the best results out of the 3 groups, and how basically they were faring. So basically it was found that the guys that just had decompression surgery on its own, without any spinal fusion, tended to fare better in terms of long-term management and not having further issues down the line. The guys that had the fusion surgery or the fusion plus decompression surgery, what they actually found is that where they'd braced the original injury, the areas above and below it, it basically moved the problem either further up or further down the spine, depending on which vertebrae they had fused. So obviously it means that, you know, long term they will be possibly going back in for more surgery. So what I would say is that even if you do have to go through the surgery, and 9 times out of 10, unless you've had, you know, a serious accident, if you've got the kind of injury which most people have, which is developed over time through bad movement habits, you haven't taken it seriously enough, you just haven't got it, that you need to take away the bad movement habits, let the back settle, and then build strength around there for whatever reason, and you do go the surgery route. Even when you have your surgery, you always, and you know, your specialist, if you do go and see a specialist, your doctor will tell you this, it's not just the surgery, it's the rehabilitation phase, the next stage, and it could, you know, take the best part of a year just to learn to walk again. That's not going into work, that's not playing sport, that's not exercising, that's just learning to walk, letting the pain subside, let the body get used to all your mechanics in your back, which has now changed because now everything's stuck and fused together. So bear that in mind. In my opinion, with my own back injury, for me for sure, to me it made sense to invest a bit of time and a bit of effort in preventing that from happening, because that seemed like it was a better spend of time than if, you know, you go the surgery route and you've got to spend a year just learning how to walk again. You can't work or run your business or play sport or any other things that you want to do. So the reason I put this section in here is that I think a lot of people just don't understand the ramifications of their decisions not to get on top of the back pain and do things properly in the rehab stages. It's always like it's in the background. I can always just have surgery. Yeah, but I'm not trying to be off surgery, because there are certain cases where that's the only option, and of course that needs to be true, that needs to be used. But be aware, make an informed decision that you're fully aware of what you're signing up to. Because if you're at that stage, if you've just got rid of the bad movement habits, if you've done the work, you know, you'd be in a far better position. Because at the end of the day, if you do have the surgery, you're still going to have to do months and months and months and months of rehab work at the other end, just trying to get your basic movement back. And once you've had this surgery, things might not ever be the same. And it's not to say that, you know, in the future, once you've had one round of surgery, you might not need to go back in and have another lot. So bear that in mind. You've got to take it on board. And the thing that surprises me the most with back pain is the people that I come across. Like I say, it's about 1 in 10 that just do not understand the importance and the effect of their decisions. And there's always an excuse: they're too busy, or, you know, we've got other things to do, or I didn't feel that bad that day, so I didn't do my exercises. You know, you are playing with fire. You know, just get the work done. The guys that all do well, they take out all the bad movement habits, they get the work done, the back's strong enough and robust enough, pulls itself straight, you know, doesn't flare up ever again. And if you do, it does flare up in the future, generally because it's more robust, it will sort itself out a lot quicker. But yeah, definitely the most important thing, if you take away one thing from this video, is to, you know, there's no such thing as non-specific back pain. There is a very specific reason why you've got your back injury and trouble, or a list of reasons. And, you know, there's very specific things that you must not do for your back to let it settle, and there's very specific things that you must do which are going to help rebuild its health in the long term.